we're in a weird part of the process where, yes, your proposals are due today. To be entirely technical, they're due before class. The best way I'm going to talk about those is this. I used to consider them much more formally than I do now, okay? What the proposals are meant to do is just kind of kick you in the ass a little bit. Just get you started. Because if I don't do that, you won't. You just won't. So yeah, I mean, very, very few of you at this stage probably have like a real argument about the movie, you know? What you more likely have, you have some ideas, or you have like a scene or two where you're like, this is kind of interesting, or like maybe this. That's fine. That's all I want. If you can do that in the proposal, so even if you haven't written it yet, you should. But don't feel like it has to be this fully formed, to return to an earlier reference, sort of Athena out of Zeus's head. You guys don't even know what I'm talking about. It's Greek mythology. But it doesn't have to be like all that. It can just be, the part in the movie where Holly says this and McClane, blah, 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 and I think it needs, like, that's fine. Just kind of spin off, brainstorm a little bit. If you like, any of that is more than fine, okay? That's all it's really got to be. Moving into next week, we're gonna talk a little bit about today. We're gonna do the research stuff. That will help you form your opinion about your ideas in two ways. Number one, you'll find people you kind of agree with and you didn't realize it. You're like, oh shit, that's what I was thinking. And like that obviously helps. Sometimes you'll read something that is stupid. You'll read things that you think are completely insane. I have never known better what I think about a given topic than when I read something I fundamentally disagree with. It's just crystalline in my mind all of a sudden. Oh, that's what I thought. That guy's an idiot. Like, it just immediately. So that's how next week hopefully will go for you. Is just looking through what other people say about the movie, what other people think, and those ideas start to take shape into actual arguments. Okay. To that end, kind of flying in the face a little bit of some of the things I just told you, I have a sample proposal on CourseDen that I wrote. If you would please open that. It's in the prompts section. You guys scroll a little bit, it's kind of hidden just by space. It's a little over 2 pages long. Hey, Dakari. We're opening the sample proposal on CourseDen. Now you're caught up. It's a little over 2 pages long, but it's double spaced, so I think we can do it. Some things I want you to know before we look at it. I write how I write. Also, this one actually is a fully formed argument. I can't help myself. I'm good at this. Or at least I'm adequate at it, you know. But what I want to do here is a couple things. Number one, we're going to read the sample proposal. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk through some of the ideas. But secondly, I'm interested to hear if it sparks any just associations whatsoever in you. Does it make you think of any other scenes from the movie? Does it make you, do you have any ideas of your own that either tie to this or refute this? I want to use this to start a conversation about the movie today, if that makes sense. So take a minute, there's 2 pages, and then to kind of sum it all up, right at the top of that 3rd page, there's an attempt at a thesis. Read over that, we'll talk about it. Go ahead. Anybody need more time? Great. All right. To try to sum all this up, kind of, what are some of the big ideas in play? Because there's a couple, kind of like, I'll put it in language you guys really like to use, sometimes to your detriment. What are the themes we're looking at in the movie? Can you pick any of those out?
Family.
Yeah. Family and sort of how we consider it. I'm playing a really weird game with these markers. All right.
Let's try this one.
Good. What else?
I like changing time.
In what way?
In the way of like Holly being like a powerful woman instead of just
Gender roles. Yeah, for sure. And of course, given that we're talking about a family and the gender roles within that family, these two ideas are interconnected, right? Sort of an offshoot of that would be how we think about marriage. One way you could define a society, there are a few, but one way you could define a society is a collection of families, right? That's kind of how it works, generally speaking. So marriage and how we conceive of it, just historically speaking, has been pretty central to how we build a society. Cool. What else? There's a couple other things going on. Just curious if you guys picked up on any of them.
Distance.
What's up?
Distance.
What do you mean by that?
The distance in relationship, and then the distance in personality
Between whom?
between John and what's her name? Arden.
Between who?
It starts with A. I don't know how to say her name.
Are with an A?
Yeah.
And this is a woman?
Yo,
Huh?
her wife. His wife.
Holly?
Yeah.
That's with an H, bro.
What's the H? Oh.
Okay. It's all good. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a way to sum that up. I mean, you're not wrong. There's a literal distance because they're on opposite sides of the coast, but there's also this figurative distance they have to. I argue in my proposal, kind of meet in the middle on, right? I'll put that up. I don't know because no, you're absolutely getting at something. I'm not sure how to. So I'm gonna put in quotation marks because there may be a more scholarly phrase we can come to. But for sure, I'll give you that. Okay. What else? There's a couple other things.
I have an idea, but it might be like kind of a stretch.
For sure.
Sounds kind of like the weird like class dichotomy thing with like Hans and Sean.
There's absolutely questions about class in here. And to give you a little bit of ammunition there, more specifically in this movie in particular, you have sort of the rise of corporatism, okay? Bear in mind, one of the things I told you guys last time, all of these texts, so, I want to try to summon an example, but I did not grow up when you grew up. What was like a band or an artist or something that was big when you were in high school? For real, help me out. Look at me like I'm crazy. You were in high school last year. What fucking...
Pearl
No. That's when I was in middle school.
Panic at the Disco.
Yeah? Come on now.
I don't know. I was in
Green Day?
the 2000s. No.
You guys are very funny.
I thought you were talking about your age.
No. I remember a kid would get onto my elementary school bus with a Green Day shirt. Like that. That's when that happens.
Maybe my high school was in the 80s music. I don't know.
All right, you guys aren't playing along. There's no artist you were really into in the past year, or your friend? Yeah, go for it.
Beatles.
Thank you. God damn it. Was that so hard? Was that so hard?
I thought you saying band.
I said. Oh.
There must be some artists.
All right, let's bring it back together. We had a rough run. Hold on, let's bring it back together. We had a rough run. Malachi brought us back. I appreciate it. Migos, I've heard of them. I would wager, and this is because I don't know a single song they have. It's not for me, okay? But I would wager their lyrics their music videos, if that's even still a thing, their whole presence as artists tells some kind of a story about right now, because they're a product of their time. You see what I'm saying? So some of the anxieties they might allude to in some of their music, or some of the things they might celebrate, some of the things they might denigrate, those are at the forefront of the values we espouse as a society now. Okay? I say that to say, again, this movie came out in 1988, so it's gonna be a little bit different. They're gonna have different things on their mind. Corporations, I mean, really rose up the way we think of them probably in the 60s, but they're in their heyday in the 80s. And so a lot of people are into that sort of thing, but you're gonna have a lot of people that are anxious about it too. That's a big change in the world. So it figures prominently in this movie, for sure. Other language I would give you guys, just to cut to the chase, I want to have a conversation, not just like list things on the board. I think at several junctures, I call McClane an everyman, and then at another point, I refer to him as a man of action. Oh, and also, well, no, I'll do that in a minute. All right, why do we have all this up on the board? Well, a couple things. Number one, as I expressed to you guys earlier, this is mostly a fully formed argument. It's not fully fleshed out. That's why papers exist, okay? This is 2 pages. If I were going to write this paper, the way that I know how to write papers, Jesus, it would be 20, 30 pages. And it would murder my heart to have to do that. But in 4 or 5 pages, whatever it is we're writing for this paper, you see already just in these 2 all the themes I'm touching upon. All right, some of these are going to figure more prominently than others in the argument I'm making in this hypothetical paper, right, that I've kind of sketched out here in front of you. But these themes now, if I were performing research, these are the things I would go and look up, right? Die Hard and family, Die Hard and gender roles, class, you get it. You see what's out there, right? Not everything is going to be as helpful as you hope initially. Some things will surprise you. Sometimes you'll find a paper on Die Hard and marriage, and you're like, oh shit. And it, again, changes your whole perspective on the movie. All of a sudden you have all these other ideas. Like that is part of the research process, or it can be. So what I would say, before we meet next time, at some point kind of sit down. As you're beginning your research, or as you're thinking about beginning your research, sit down and say, well, what are the big themes I'm really interested in right now? This is how you start research, okay? Like this. I'm going to add a little bit to the list just to kind of fully express what it is I'm talking about. Gender roles, we can define that a little more specifically, right? There's some great stuff out there on Die Hard and feminism, for instance. Some people on either side of the fence, by the way. Some people think Die Hard is kind of, at least for its time, got some real feminist ideas kicking around. Other people think it's a misogynist piece of shit. So there's some stuff out there to again, guide your thinking, I suppose. All right, as I struggle with this, God. Oh, is anybody writing this down? Great. Woo! That's like making a hole in one just there. I feel really good about me. I want to talk about the movie for just a second, and then we're going to talk more about research. I don't know how to start this conversation because it's something I wrote and gave to you. Do you guys have any thoughts on this sample proposal, on any of the arguments in there? If you want to keep it simple and say agree, disagree, we could do that. If you want to go a little further than that, like, does it remind you of any scenes? Do you have any associations?
I liked the class argument. I thought that was interesting.
How so, I suppose?
You know, like, watched it maybe it's been a while since I've seen it. You know, the part where when the body falls on like the police car.
Yeah.
I think it's like I'm going from like the top of the social ladder down to the bottom, like street level.
Yeah. Oh, whose body is it?
Is
it
that Liz?
No. It's before Ellis gets got. I'm trying to remember. I don't. Oh, it's not Takagi, is it?
No.
Is it one of the henchmen?
Yeah.
Oh,
It was one of the
John's
henchmen.
Yeah, John's grandma. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's using him as a prop. You have to be careful with class there because, like, Gruber is absolutely corporate, top of the ladder, all that stuff. Henchmen, they're henchmen, right? Like they're.
Gruber falls off the building at the end.
He does. Oh, I told you guys I was going to share a fun fact about the movie. Fun fact about that scene. For that shot, they really drop Alan Rickman. They really drop Snape like 20 stories or something into a big mat. Okay. Huh?
They drop snakes down the building.
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah.
Like, don't stunt everyone.
No, because the shot it's on his face, right? There's no way to fake that. So they drop his ass. But the trivia is they count on 3 and drop him, but they drop him on 2. He was so pissed. But his reaction in the movie, that like is real. Real terror in that moment. If you go watch that scene again, that's a man thinking, what the fuck? Like that's real. That's real.
She was like, this is a nice career.
Yeah, well, it's his first movie too.
Right. So
Yeah. Anyway,
And he's also dropping up like the nice ass watch that Holly has on, so that could be something too.
we can talk about class with that. Thank you to return us to actual discussion. What's the deal with that watch? When in the scene we're talking about, actually, when Hans is getting dropped off the building, he has a hold of Holly. He has a hold of her watch. McClane has to undo the clasp to get Hans off, and as he falls, the watch falls to. What is that watch even about? Does anybody remember?
She bought it from my adolescence, right?
Yeah, to like celebrate her success.
It's a Rolex.
It's nice. It's nice. And again, but it's totally representative of that world. Both in terms of, again, emblematic of her personal success, but also it is a Rolex, emblematic of money, right? The accrual of wealth. That's what that watch is. That's what that watch is just in your day-to-day.
And he's clinging onto it for dear life.
Yeah. And the only way to save Holly is to get it off of her. Well, that in a way, but it's also, I mean, it's on her wrist. What else kind of traps you on your wrist? This says a lot about your background, actually. This is very good. Handcuffs. Handcuffs. Just, you could easily argue in this scene that the film is trying to communicate she's kind of trapped by this corporate world. It's kind of fooled her into thinking certain things or seeing the world a certain. And the only way to save her, literally, but also figuratively, as a mother, all that, is to get her out of it. Hans clings to it because that's what he is. Through the whole movie, that's what he is. That's what he's all about. Holly is about that world, but also you see she's worried about her kids. You see she wants her family. Like that's not her real priority. She's, one argument, she's been misled in some way, right? And that's what the watch is. So when she loses it, that's her saying, that's her asserting like what her real priority is. Now, we have to consider specifics. She does not take the watch off herself. To be fair, she can't. Hans has got one hand, and I think the other one's like clinging to something, because that's what anyone would do, right? McClane takes it off of her. Can we do anything with that? The fact that McClane takes this watch off of her, that represents all those things. So what? What does that business success offer Holly? We talked about this last time.
It kind of offers her like a power like over John.
What is it? Full stop, it offers her independence.
Yeah.
Right? Now, may that at times construe as power over McClane? Maybe. But at the beginning of the movie, she's just away from him. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they were together, maybe there'd be some power involved. But this is, I'm good, bro. Like, I'm over here, you're over there. You know, like, but it offers her that in a way that you get the sense, could not have had otherwise, right? And for McClane to take it off here, and again, to be fair, to save her, What else has McClane taken off of her, you could argue? That independence. In the words of Dave Chappelle that I love quoting, gotcha, bitch. No, but like, that is a really good reference. But anyway, there's different ways to read that, right? The nicer way to read it is, again, he's literally saving her. He's also figuratively saving her because the movie, as I argue in the thing I gave you, is all about family. And if it was a man or a woman in Holly's position, the stories we like to tell ourselves about ourselves is that we value family above all else. Again, think about any Christmas movie you've ever seen. Somebody name one. Help
It's
us
a
out.
Wonderful Life.
No one has seen that one, but it's very good. Home Alone is good. What was the other one? Polar Express. I've not seen that one. I mean, I think I was like in my 20s when it came out, so it's not.
National Lampoon's Vacation. Christmas Vacation.
Um,
Christmas Vacation.
Frosty the Snowman.
Frosty the Snowman. That one's more fairy tale. We'll go with Home Alone.
Christmas Vacation.
Home Alone is good. Home Alone is good because it actually has a similar conversation around it that Die Hard does. Some people don't think it's a Christmas movie, Home Alone. I know. But some people feel the same way about Die Hard. Think about it. They're super similar, weirdly. The differences that exist largely because the main character is either 40 or 12, right? Like that's where the differences come from. But everything else, trapped in a building, got to defend it against guys coming in to take it. What's the real drama in the film, though? It's family. We got to get the family back together. When Kevin in Home Alone, first of all, actually almost gets caught by the bad guys. He has to have an old man come in and save his ass with a shovel, if you remember. Because he's a kid. The movie doesn't end there. The movie ends when the family shows up. That's what matters in these films. Die Hard is the same way. Okay? What matters for Holly, all under the surface the whole time, is her kids, her husband maybe, if he can get his jackass shit together, right? Like, that's what matters. And so the sunnier way to argue about that scene is he helps her out in his husband's role of like, nah, come on, shake that shit off. Like we're gonna be a family now. The other way to read it, less nice, is who was he at the start of the movie? What kind of guy was he? What was his opinion on marriage? We talked about this. They have different ideas about what a marriage should be, right? What's his idea?
Husband's breadwinner, wife kills.
If you have that at the forefront of your mind, and here at the end he's like taking her out of that corporate world, couldn't you also read it as this is just him saying, get back on the couch, right? Like it's kind of right?
I was born.
People read that scene that way too. Both are in play.
Can you view it as him also kind of like letting go of his insecurity of her being like independent?
I'd be interested to hear your thinking on that.
Like, he lets go of the watch, which represents like all the corporate stuff. It's like, oh, I don't give a shit if she's an independent woman, it can go.
Well, I mean,
And at the end of the movie, when he's like introduces her by her maiden name, just symbolic of her being independent.
what I was going to say, the people who read the watch scene as he's a misogynist totally ignore the end of the movie, right? So, again, if the movie ended right there, if he was just like, and then Hans falls and they make out for a second and the credits, that second argument I think would have more legs, that he's maybe just a misogynist, right? But, yeah, the very next scene where McClane is like, again, they're meeting Al finally face to face. He's like, this is my wife, Holly Gennaro. That's a big moment. It kind of takes the whole argument about the watch and like, you can't be independent now and sort of pokes pretty big holes in it, right? Like, he's come around, you know? Let's talk about the other thing, though. What about the fact that Holly says McClane? The hell do we do about that?
I feel like it's like a balance, like both sides have to sacrifice something to like come to a middle ground.
I'm inclined to agree with you. That again, well, I don't want to play my hand up. So, to tease that out a little bit, we talked about this last time, more of a partnership, right? I think all of us, at least it sounded like last time, would agree. Again, Holly would agree. McClane's idea of a marriage at the start of the movie is man's at the top, woman's much closer to the bottom. Family dog might be actually in between, right? That's just you do the cooking. Oh my goodness. I'm terribly confused about what that was. But yeah, that's kind of the setup at the start. And he's trying to not think that way, but he does. Holly is rightfully pissed off about that. That's the start of the movie. By the end, he seems to come around on at least the name and what it represents, so that's important. Holly doesn't seem to want to be in charge because she changes her name back. Now again, the same people that read the watch moment as a misogynist act read her going by McClane again as like cementing that, as saying, yeah, I'm gonna go back to being a wife, I'm not interested in being in it, like totally shutting down all the feminist stuff in the movie in the closing scene. But again, I would say, well, don't they totally ignore that 2 seconds before that McClane says Gennaro, right? So my point is, again, I'm inclined to side with you that the movie, especially even in 2022, man, we're so given to hyperbole, like it has to either be the man in charge or the woman in charge. The movie is like, no, it's a partnership. Holly should have more power than she has in the marriage, which of course means McClane should have less, but they should be more even, more equal. And by the way, that's going to be a tricky thing to figure out if you start unequal, right? It takes time. It gets messy. Sometimes you live on opposite sides of the country, right? But yeah, what we just did, by the way, is we kind of just sort of wrote 2 body paragraphs in the air here. We looked at one scene, one moment. I want to really highlight that. One moment in a scene. There's all kinds of crazy shit in that scene where McClane walks in and he tricks Hans because he's got the gun on his back. McClane does, right? There's all kinds of other stuff going on, but we highlighted one aspect, the watch, for the argument we wanted to make. Then we went to the next scene. We highlighted one aspect, the name flip. There's other stuff going on in that moment too. How about the Viking coming back from the dead? Carl. His name was Carl, but like Carl. You guys, definitely gets hung by the neck. Definitely dead. And just out of nowhere, also has the largest gun you've ever seen. They weren't like, we should take that off his corpse. Like, let him have it. There's all kinds of stuff going on is my point. But just like we talked about with the poems, just like we talked about with the book, you got to focus on details. 1 or 2 things in a given scene, that's plenty. If you try to take on a whole scene at once, all you will do is summarize the movie for me. And I have seen it. I've seen it a lot, actually. We don't need to do that. Any other thoughts at all? Yes, ma'am.
I have like 2 questions.
Go for it.
Okay. So Hans isn't a terrorist because he made it.
Yeah, well, they tell him that at the end, right? Holly kind of calls him out. She says, well, McClane does it and Holly does it, which is kind of a nice, like, no moment. Like, they kind of, she calls him a thief. And he says a very good thief or something like that. He pretends to be a terrorist, right? Like, the reason Hans is so successful, like he almost gets away with it, is because he knows how to prey upon people's expectations, their sort of stereotypical expectations. He's like, I'm German, I'm dressed in a suit. If I show up and I take hostages and I give him like names of stuff that he sees on 60 Minutes, right? Like, he knows how to play the game and make them think, oh, he's crazy. Like he's a terrorist, crazy person. Like, we got to deal with him like that. That's going to allow him to do all the really smart, underhanded thief shit that he really wants to do. So the whole movie, he's taking advantage of other people, assuming he's a caricature. Are you guys familiar with that term?
Mm-hmm.
A caricature is not a real person. Like, again, when I say terrorist, when I say that word, if you think about it for 2 seconds, we all start to form a kind of picture of a kind of a person, right? And look, we don't have to go down too far down this rabbit hole, but like, it's got some racial stuff going on. It's probably got some religious stuff going on. They got like a certain kind of gun. Like, we all see the same, because again, we have that story in our society. We have that stereotype. It's a little bit different in the 80s, but he's a German terrorist. All right, a lot of that stuff still applies, and he knows that. So that's how he easily tricks people, easily, right? That's a different paper from what we're talking about here, but for sure, that's going on in the movie. Like, if I was researching that, I would maybe Die Hard and representation or something like that. Like, how are people represented? Because Han's a really interesting character. What was your second question? You said you had two.
Holly at one point in the movie did trust John. Right? Like when
I don't know. Why you say that?
when he was sitting with the dude that had a crush on him.
Ellis?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't remember the conversation, but she just did agree with what he was doing. Like trying to get him,
Trying to do what?
trying to get him.
The only scene that I remember that you might be referencing,
Is it the one where she's like, Alice has eyes on you and they're in her office?
no. It's when they're already captured, and Ellis.
Is trying to like convince him that he knows.
Well, it's before that though. It's right before that. Ellis is talking to Holly. Like, Holly realizes it's John. She's like, only John could piss somebody off or make somebody that angry or something. She says something like that. But she says it in a way that's like fun for the audience because it's like they fight, you know. But she says it in a way like she has feelings for him, right? Like it's a weird compliment because these are people that have them hostage. If you want somebody to be upset, it's probably the guys that are taking you hostage. You're like, yeah, fuck those guys. So she says it, and then Ellis realizes that it's McClane, and he goes to use it because he's a weasel. But Ellis's point is like,
I don't think that's the same.
well, damn, because he goes, get your fucking husband, get him out of here. We need the cop, blah blah blah. Like, I don't know what scene you're talking about then. Think more on it. We can talk about it later then if it comes to you. I mean, there's a really early scene where they're in her office and she turns the picture of her family down, like she puts it on the desk. But I would say that's not her trusting him. I'm saying she's super pissed at him, because don't want to look at him. Anyway, where were we? Anything else you guys got? We're gonna do another thing, but I'm just curious. Any other thoughts on the film or questions? Questions are good. Anything at all? You can borrow my brain for a second. I'm really good at this. It's so not financially savvy, but I'm really good at this. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, it's not a question, but
Okay.
I just like the fact how McClane was sitting in the front of the limo in the beginning of
Yeah.
the movie, but now he's in the back.
Yeah.
And like, I wanted to see a scene of him, like, the bear and stuff, but like, where's the bear? They're in the back.
I believe the bear is still in the limo. I don't know if you see it or not. But yeah, I mean, think about it. All right, so we talked about this in the video. We weren't able to do it in class. But McClane is super uncomfortable getting in the limo. Argyle is super uncomfortable driving the limo, right? Because they don't belong. They just do not belong in that car with all the connotations it has, right? But weirdly, in the end now, again, we're changed somehow. He's in the back of it with his wife. They're getting whisked away to their family on Christmas Eve. It's like a honeymoon almost type of thing. What kind of limousine is it? Busted all to hell. Argyle has his moment in the sun where he rams the bad guys. It's all trashed. You wouldn't see that limousine rolling down the road and go, oh, I bet, some like high rollers or something.
Right.
Oh yeah. It's so now the argument would be, now it's okay to sit in the back. One of the reasons is it's not the same car. It's been lowered on the socioeconomic ladder, right? Do what?
Got McLean.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, through a heroic act, first of all, which is cool, but also just through damage. It's sort of wearing the damage of being a hero, you know, if that makes sense.
I forgot the card got damaged.
It's all good. I mean, another way to think of it, we're also, because we're talking about narratives, right? I'm not saying this about real people, but according to the narrative about like wealthy folks, they don't really get their hands dirty usually, right? So they don't show damage. Again, if you think of McClane at the end, his shirt is brown by the end of the movie. Did not start that way. Like he wears the grime and everything that he accumulates from doing the dirty work, right? The kind of blue collar effort of being a hero. The car does too. And it's interesting that Holly's in the back with him. I mean, again, that suggests she's kind of joined that side, like not being the moneyed super success, like she's more down to earth now in that moment. I do wonder about the bear. I don't know where the bear, I think they put him up front. I would just forget. It's a present for his kids, so like they take it with them, but I don't know.
Isn't it like that?
No, it's pretty big for that. But anyway, the point is that part of that argument would have to include the fact that the limousine is kind of shot to shit now. That's important. Again, details. Details always matter. Yes, ma'am.
The scene where he was in the bathroom, he had glass in his face.
Good scene.
He's talking to Al about
Mhm.
like, and he just wanted to say it was sorry.
Right? We don't have time to probably pull it up. The scene we're referencing, really important scene. He has just done the action hero, semi-impossible thing where he's getting shot at, runs barefoot through a bunch of glass, right? That's one of those moments in the movie where people are like, he's not an everyman hero because this is not something normal people do. For sure. Again, counter argument to that would be, well, normal people aren't getting shot at either. You would surprise yourself probably with the things you're capable of if you're being shot at. Like, don't go test it, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, who knows? But what matters, how would you describe, if you guys remember the scene, he's pulling glass out of his feet, which is not awesome. And he's on the walkie-talkie with Al, and he's talking to him, and he's like, I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit, but like, he says he doesn't think he's gonna get out of this. He says, if you see my wife, tell her the one thing, like I should have said the one thing she's never heard me say, I should have said it 1,000 times, just tell her I'm sorry. How would you describe McClane in that scene? What adjectives could you use?
Like humble.
Yeah, let's push on that a little bit. What other, there's some other words we could use. I'm thinking of a B one. He's vulnerable, right? He's borderline crying, you know? Like he's having this real moment. Again, that your Stallones and your Schwarzeneggers and all those guys don't have in their movies. Well, what about that? Why is he so vulnerable? Why is he saying, if you see my wife, tell her I'm sorry? Let's start there.
He doesn't think he's gonna make it out.
Why not? Why doesn't he think he's going to make it? He's already messed up.
He's out of his element.
He's out of anybody's element. I mean, yeah. It's one guy versus, I don't know, 10 terrorist guys with guns. You know, odds are not in your favor. And even if you give yourself up, I don't have the opinion that those are like, all right, bygones are bygones. Yeah, no, he's done. He's done. Yeah. They probably let Kyle have his way with him, right? So, in this moment, we get to see him not as a hero, but as a husband, maybe, right? And he says he does the one thing he never could do, and we need to talk about that, is say he's sorry, right? Let's start. Why could he says he could never say it? Why do you think that is?
Because it implies he was wrong.
He was wrong. What else does it mean if you say you're, for a guy like McClane, we got to remember the specifics.
You're like humbling yourself.
He doesn't want to cry.
Yeah, well, so all of that, by the way, this masculine pride, right, that he absolutely exudes at the beginning of the movie in different ways. If you think about to our discussion last time, the scene where he's with Holly and he makes an ass of himself, and as soon as she leaves, he's like, you fucking idiot, right? Like what? He knows he can't be doing that, right? He knows he has to change, but he can't help it. There's a larger argument there about like the power of these masculine ideals, what they might be doing to him. Like they kind of push him in certain directions. He can't even help it all the time. You know what I'm saying? But in this moment, for some kind of a reason, maybe multiple reasons, that kind of comes down, right? He talks to Al, a guy he's never met, by the way. He talks to Al, he kind of opens up, borderline cries, you know, lowers himself is kind of the language you guys are using, like for his wife, like, you know what I'm saying? That's an important scene. Another thing we can think about in that scene we haven't brought up, do you guys remember, and you may not, Al kind of opens up to McClane in this scene too. Does anybody recall what that is? He tells him a story. He shoots a kid. And they start out kind of joking. Al and McClane do. And he's like, blah, 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 and something about, you're behind a desk. What, I figured you for the street. Yeah. And there's a level of respect there. Like, you're not a desk cop, you're a street cop. Like, that's more action hero-y, you know. And he says he shot a kid. And it's like a real human moment. You know, again, not a guy moment, but a human moment of, I fucked up, it could have happened to anybody, but I shot this, and he's talking about trauma now, right? Again, Al's being vulnerable in this moment. You could argue that allows McClane to be vulnerable in this moment. And now all of a sudden we're talking about, well, why is that? Why does Al being vulnerable make it okay for McClane to be? Sure, but in what way?
Is it because like they're both like cops or some sort of like connection?
He's a dude.
What now?
He's a dude, you know, a male. It's easier to like talk to like a male versus like a woman, and they just see you as like inferior now or something.
I mean, I think that's in play again because he says he could never tell his wife this, and he has to kind of go through an intermediary. He's like, I'm gonna be dead, so you give this message to her, type of thing. That's part of it. But like what I'm trying to push on is like another way to maybe phrase it to help us think about it. You could argue McClane could not be this vulnerable with Al until Al's vulnerable himself. You could argue that. Why is that? What's the deal? They are friends. They're about as close as you can be with anybody you haven't met, right?
Like he realizes that they're both kind of
And not what?
not like I guess perfect. First thing I think of,
Perfect what?
like a perfect person.
Nah, come on, be more specific.
Maniac?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, we're thinking about possible arguments here. Go with me for just a second. Is it possible that McClane and Al, even though they're buddies, you know, they kind of measure each other? Think about some other weird parts of the movie that we have not had time to talk about. Think about when we meet Al. He's in a grocery store, getting a bunch of, like, I think he buys every Twinkie in the place. Do you guys remember his interaction with the clerk in that grocery store?
The donuts and stuff?
Yeah, he's like, I thought cops only ate donuts. He says, these are for my wife. He goes, sure. What does that sure mean?
Like
These are for you, you bitch. That's what it means. That is what he's saying. That is what he is implying. He's implying he's an out-of-shape cop who just eats donuts all day. And weirdly, given what Al says, he's kind of implying he's pregnant. Like, he's just implying he's a layabout. You're not a man. You're just a donut machine. Fucking, right? That's what happened. So often in the movie, when McClane walks in and he finds out Holly has changed her name, what's the joke the receptionist makes when McClane walks in? Do you remember? Yeah. He says if it would help you find your zipper if you need to take a leak. He's known this guy for 10 seconds. He's going to hit him with a dick joke. Why? Because we're both men, and, you know, that's what we got, so, haha. Right, like, all through the movie. Well, Capital M men, that's what they do, right? Like, so much of the movie is just weird pissing contests. Think about, now this is the last one I'll hit you with, we'll turn to our regularly scheduled discussion. What time is it, by the way?
11:50.
Oh, good. This is taking too long, that's my fault. Anyway, when Al walks in, he's investigating. There was a 911 call, and they felt like it was doubtful, but he needs to check it out. He's a cop. He's checking it out. He walks in, he sees a dude behind the desk, dressed up. Seems like, kind of back to how Hans plays it, seems like, well, this guy belongs here. You know? Okay. He talks to him for a second, because that's part of his job. Now, you may not remember this. I do, but I'm curious. The receptionist says, like, one thing to Al, and it's enough to trick him. Does anybody remember what that is?
You say go ahead or like to check the things?
He says one thing before that. Because he's got to trick him first. He's got to make him think he belongs, and then, you're good.
Isn't he talking about something that he's watching?
Mm-hmm. What's he watching? Do you remember? Football. He's got a little TV, a little 80s black and white TV. And I believe it's USC. He might say this because they're in California. Because he says something about USC. He's like, I got $50 on these assholes. That's what he says. So he's talking about football. And he's talking about betting on it. That is just man stuff, up and down. What's he trying to trick Al into believing? He's trying to trick Al into believing he's a man doing his job. And weirdly, part of that is he can't give a complete shit about it. Because football's on, and there's money to be made. Man stuff. So it happens all through the movie, is my real point, okay? And then we get to this moment, and we have two guys like, man, I shot a kid. He's like, dude, I've never said sorry to my wife. Like, if they weren't on walkie-talkies, they would hug, right? My argument here is, it's because Al makes himself vulnerable first that McClane is allowed to be vulnerable, sort of according to the rules of masculinity, I guess, in the movie. The flip side of that is, you can't be vulnerable the rest of the time. You can't admit. It's not like McClane just had this realization. He's been walking around that with the whole movie, right? But you can't admit it. You definitely can't admit it to another guy.
Is it like that he hears something, so I guess I will too, kind of thing?
It's like, what now?
So like, oh, I'll hear something, so I guess I'll hear something too.
Yeah, but again, there's always going to be slightly different ways to spin it, okay? I think what you're saying is like, it's like an exchange,
Yeah.
in a way. Yes, but again, I would push on that further and say it's something they both wanted to exchange, right? Like, what do you get out of being vulnerable when you share that with somebody?
Like a sense of like connection.
Yeah, and you also, just to get it off your chest, like all these things. But again, these are all the things in the movie that men aren't allowed to do. But they can do it here because, weirdly, in a bathroom that's like a safe space, where they're both allowed to be vulnerable. And it's private because it's just the walkie-talkie, it's just them. It's like no one else is gonna know. It's just, we're not gonna be super masculine guys right here. And I'm gonna leave this room, I'm gonna shoot somebody in the face. But right now, that tells you a whole lot about how masculinity works in the movie, right? The power it has over these characters. What's Al's big moment in the movie? When he shoots Carl in the face. Yeah? We're only going to talk about this for a second because it makes everyone uncomfortable. There's been an argument that has existed for a very long time. What's gun is a pretty good metaphor for what? You probably don't talk about this much in high school, but I'm just curious. Think about it. Al can't draw his gun for pretty good reason, right? But he can't draw his gun. And then at the end, he's got it fully out. He's in the stance. He's doing all that. Blows the guy away. What's a gun in a movie like this? Anybody know? How are you gonna make me say it?
Is it a dick?
Yes. I can't say it that way. After me, it's a penis. But yeah. It's an implement of power. It's pretty damn phallic. I mean, there's like chambers and that's what. But you get the point. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you serious?
Oh, for sure. Oh, decades of scholarship. A sword or a gun, anything that's phallic that's used, especially violently, used to assert power, is usually a penis. That's only because, hey, I didn't come up with it. That's only because, hear me out, historically, people wielding penises have also wielded power. So if you have a thing that kind of looks like one in a way, and it's used to assert power, well, that's just like a stand-in for a penis. And look,
Is that like actually?
huh?
Is that like historically? Like
For sure.
or something?
Hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. I'm not saying it's conscious. I'm not saying the guy that wrote the script was like, he's gonna get, no. Again, these are part of the narrative. Like, think about it for just a second. Al is pretty emasculated through the whole movie. Our introduction to him in the convenience store, where look, we don't know if he has a wife or not. You might give him the benefit of the doubt. Some of you might have been like, yeah, he's just buying it for himself. Fuck this guy. Like, you don't know, you know? He tells McClane he can't draw his gun, so he's at the desk, he's not on the street. Especially when compared to McClane throughout the movie, one of them is way more masculine than the other. He just is. But at the end, he reclaims his masculinity by popping that guy in the face. Reclaim your masculinity metaphorically. Reclaims the penis. Anyway, let's talk about research real quick. Dakari, we need the lights for us. Even though this is very bright. All off. Yeah, I should have been clearer, sorry. Okay. You have bibs due next week. All this is kind of in flux. Look, do your best to get them in when they're due. I think it will help you. But if you need an extra 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever it is, actually stick to that deadline. Some of you have been trying to do that and it has been a struggle for you. Yeah. But what are we looking at right now? It's the library. And very similar to our discussion about Vonnegut, that's part of the reason I teach that paper second. The process here is the same. I mean, the texts, oh my goodness. The texts are going to be different. One thing I want to show you real quick. The unfortunate truth about Die Hard, just as language, is it's a title because it was already like a phrase we had. We don't use it very much anymore. But if you just look up Die Hard, you're going to find all kinds of stuff about dying and hard. So, Die Hard and film, just from the jump, will help you out, okay? It won't be perfect. I mean, I'm sure we'll get some screwed up results even with that. But it'll help you. Yeah, look, already, lateral neck x-ray. So that, yeah, because it's a phrase. There you go. Anyway, full text and peer-reviewed journals. Okay, so we're looking a little bit better. There's other things we're going to do, but from the top, we have what could be pretty interesting. I'm actually going to archetypal hero, external and internal monsters. We've spent the past 2 days talking about those internal ones. Christmas and the family, holy shit. Role of women, corporatism, American cultural hero, like this. The paper I don't have to write anymore because I wrote all my papers. But if I were, I'd be looking at this article. I would. But that said, I mean, there's Die Hard in Notting Hill. That's a Hugh Grant romantic comedy. I don't know if any of you know what that even means. But that's not Die Hard, so that's weird. But let's say we want to look around for what else we could find. Die Hard and film and feminism. Oh, that sounds great too. Cowboys, Die Hard, real men and businessmen in the Reagan-era blockbuster. Damn. I'd probably be looking at that one. You know, and we haven't even scrolled. I guess some of this is going to be weird, given some of our language. Hard Candy, which is a wild movie from my childhood. Not Die Hard whatsoever. I don't know if that article would help us. So you got to pick through different things, you know, but there's going to be stuff here. The other thing you can do, though, you should look at the library. You should. Because Die Hard is a popular film. It's not an art house film. It was in theaters, it made millions of dollars, your parents went to see it, all that stuff. Because of that, there's also going to be a fair amount of popular media written about it. So you can also just do this. You just go to Google. Now, you can't just Google the movie Die Hard because all you're going to find is stuff about like IMDb, Wikipedia. I mean, to be clear, Wikipedia can sometimes be helpful if you go all the way to the bottom. You go to references. These are all the articles that they use to make this Wikipedia article. How bananas is that? There might be something in there, but that'd be hard hunting. What would be better is learning to spell. And then, okay, here's some weird stuff here. But again, these are articles, sometimes blog posts. Like I'm just going to go ahead and guess that anotherangrywwoman.com is probably a blog where she's angry. But you just look around, you see what you can find. Women's Fight Back. Is Die Hard a feminist movie? That's interesting, right? The paper I'm writing, I happen to think so. Is it one where women come out on top? No. Is that feasible in 1988? I don't think so. So I'd be interested to see what they say, and I'm gonna go ahead and say I probably disagree with it. But I'd want to go find out. Depending on whatever you're looking at, by the way. There's one, we had a question earlier about, and I'm gonna not remember your entire question, but I remember my answer to it. The representation in Die Hard. Is Die Hard a political movie? That's from Dimcast USA. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that's a trash website. We're not interested in that. That's interesting. This is a decent website. The Perfect Lean, Mean, Macho Machine. So obviously we're talking about masculinity to a degree, and we're dealing with pop-ups. So I'll be honest with you. I looked this up before class because I knew our discussion would go this way. This is a good article, but it's a longer article. You guys, if you click on this, will probably scroll and go, nah, that's too long for me. It's a good article. Real talk. Right about here, they start talking about visual techniques, which we haven't even had time to discuss. But they walk you through a couple scenes where McClane, just from the cinematography, like just from the way the scenes are shot, seems trapped, which he is, right? But their point is the film itself kind of reinforces that, how alone he is, how the odds are stacked up against him to kind of trick you visually into seeing that too. But then once they get past that, we'll find it real quick. Now they start talking about the Old West and how he's not that same kind of hero, and they move into some of the discussions we've actually already had. But they take it in slightly different directions. Like, my point is, you can find really good stuff on some of these popular websites. Point of fact, I'm hoping I still have it up. Yeah, I do. I actually give you guys a sample source for a guy named Rehan. Die Hard humanized and perfected the action movie. We've talked a little bit about that in the inverse, right? In Vonnegut, dehumanization. He's saying Die Hard, part of the reasons it's good is because there's actual human beings in it. That's interesting. Anyway, so you have a lot of options. I'm going to show you a bad one. Where was it? Here we go. I found this one too. I was a little bit worried because I saw any URL that's like really idealistic. Yeah, like from the top, you're like, oh, this isn't going to be a good article. And it isn't. It's really bad. If you have 10 minutes to kill and you want to read how not to talk about a movie, you can read this. But just look, just from the top, you're like, oh, they feel a certain kind of way, and they're going to read the movie according to that certain kind of. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. So sometimes you can judge a book by its cover. If you click on an article that's supposed to be about a movie, and you're greeted with an insane Microsoft Paint job, you probably just click out. You know, like I'll save myself the time. I'll go do something else. But some of these are good too. The library is there. I didn't give you any other search terms, but that is what we were doing before all this. We get one of the lights for us, Carter. That's what we were doing at the top of the class, right? These are a good many, but there's more search terms we could use depending upon whatever argument we're interested in talking about in the movie. You can do that through the library, you can do that through Google. You gotta be a little choosier when it comes to Google, okay? And I give you that sample source on Courstin that I happen to think is pretty good. So if you're not sure what to look for, you can start there. You can start with the Brehan article on Courstin as well. Are there any questions about that? Oh, go for it.
So I know last time,
Yes.
like, when we picked out the sources and then we were writing on paper,
Mhm.
we did it based on like the topic, not like on the sources. So this time, it's like each paragraph supposed to be about the, like, say I chose masculinity, and then I relate my sources to masculinity, or is it like my whole paper's masculinity, and then I relate like each different scene from the film?
Let me stop. Okay. You sort of asked you implied a question that I think may help more than the one you asked. Let's talk about the paper itself. I think I talked about this in the video, but I may not. The paper we are writing is similar to paper 2 in one respect: research. Paper 2 is a lower stakes, lower pressure way to have you guys do a bunch of research and figure out how to do that. That's why we do it as a second paper. That part is pretty similar to this part. Just the act of research and looking through source, like all that, okay? That stays the same. The rest of the paper is pretty different. The rest of the paper is actually much more like a paper 1, okay? I want you, by the end of this process, right? You don't have to have it right now. By the end of this process, have some kind of an argument about the movie. The proposal I gave you guys. What does Die Hard have to say about, evolving gender roles, maybe what that has to do with marriage in 1988, and that's basically what I gave you. That involves a lot of this stuff, but you can have totally different arguments about class in the movie. You can have totally, it's not even up here, there's definitely arguments in the movie about race, all kinds of stuff going on that you could dig into. And that would guide your research. To get back to your question, what I would say is, whatever ideas you might have about the movie, pick out some of those themes, use it to guide your research, but what you're looking for is arguments to engage with. So some of them you might agree with, some of them you might, again, the angrywoman.com, another angrywoman.com, chances are very good, judging from the URL, that person would not agree with my reading of Holly and McClane's relationship by the end of the movie. It doesn't seem likely, right? But if I read her article and I didn't think it was too over the top, which can happen on Google, okay? It's just a point I don't agree with. I could still pull a quotation from that and then talk about why I disagree with it. You see what I'm saying? That's how I want you to think about your research. You're still quoting for language, you're quoting for like ideas, just like we've done the whole semester. But now, the other way to talk about paper 3, paper 2 is Destiny's Child, okay? Paper 3, you're Beyonce. You are the star. All the research you do, those are backup singers. They come in when you need them, but your ideas, your arguments, they are what matters here. In a roundabout way, does that answer your question? Okay, we can talk more about it, but anyway. Other questions?
Is Die Hard movie like a required bib? Like, you know how we
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, thank you. You threw me for a second. No. Actually, I don't want you to. The reason you did it in the second paper is because, again, the paper is a little bit different. Like, Vonnegut is our primary source, but it's not our primary focus, In this one, no. Your proposal is all about Die Hard, right? So we got that taken care of. Your bibs, I want you to use those for secondary sources. That's a very good question. Thank you. Other questions? I'll see you on Tuesday. Thank you guys.